Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Real Heroes Show. I am Cory, and you'll may notice that I have a different guest with me this evening. I have my good buddy, accomplished photographer, and fellow movie snob Shane Ware with me tonight. Shane, how are you, bud?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
You know, I can't complain. It's always good to actually talk with you about movies instead of feverishly text you.
That's true.
Because you type really fast, and it's really hard.
I'm always on my laptop, so I'm always typing really quickly, faster than I can type on a phone.
That's the difference. I'm always on my phone, and I'm like, I can't get my point out because Shane's writing.
Because I have like 25 texts in a row.
Awesome, man. Well, I figured, there was some stuff that came out last week. One Senor JJ Abrams had some comments that he made about plans and stuff, and whether or not that is involving Star Wars, I'm not 100% certain. I have a feeling it is, but I have the article here because I'm old and I can't remember any of this shit. It's way too long of a quote, but he's doing some promotion for Super 8, which is now out on 4K Blu-ray, which I'll probably be reviewing for the channel at some point soon because it came in the other day. And someone asked him, specifically, do you feel that the Star Wars trilogy would have benefited from having a plan? And JJ gave the non-answer of all non-answers, and he said, I've been involved in a number of projects that have been, in most cases, series that have ideas that begin the thing where you feel like you know where it's going to go. And sometimes it's an actor who comes in, other times it's a relationship that, as written, doesn't quite work, and things that you think are going to be so well received just crash and burn, and other things that you think like, oh, that's a small moment or that's a one episode character, suddenly become a hugely important part of the story. I feel like what I've learned as a lesson a few times now, and it's something that especially in this pandemic year, working with writers has become clear, the lesson is that you have to plan things as best you can, and you always need to be able to respond to the unexpected. And the unexpected can come in all sorts of forms, and I do think that there's nothing more important than knowing where you're going. So, Shane, I'll let you kick this off. I'm sure you have thoughts. How does that line up with how the Star Wars sequel trilogy panned out?
Yeah, so one of probably the most constant criticism of the Star Wars sequel trilogy is that it seemed like they had no idea where they were going. You start with JJ Abrams with The Force Awakens, and he sets up this entire mystery box, as JJ Abrams usually does, with all of these new characters and all of these new ideas. And then they completely pivot and they switch to Rian Johnson, who has his answers to those ideas. He cuts out some of them. I mean, he completely, like the Knights of Ren, he was just like, screw it. Like,
they're
I
not
don't
even
care.
in the movie, right?
No, I don't think they are.
Yeah.
He was just like, yeah, it's not important. Snoke, he just murders. But then, like, he takes some ideas, like the Rey's lineage, and he expands upon those and focuses on those. I think his character of Luke, which some people disagree with, was a direct line from The Force Awakens. Han Solo says, like, he gave it all up, like he walked away. And so Rian Johnson wrote that character. So I don't know why people are pissed about that. But anyways, that's the different video.
Totally
entirely. But anyways, he expanded upon some ideas and then threw others away. And obviously there was a huge backlash as to how he answered those questions. And
really?
So then they brought they originally had Colin Trevorrow, and then he couldn't work it out. And so they brought JJ Abrams back in. And of course, it's like Whiplash, where JJ is like, no, I'm going to go back to what I thought the answers to the questions were. And so you get basically like the bookends of a JJ Abrams trilogy filled in with a middle piece that is not a JJ Abrams movie. And it just feels like your head is just back and forth and back and forth. And really, I don't even blame the directors for any of this, really. I mean, they're writing to the best of their ability given the situation that they're dropped into. And JJ wasn't even the original writer of the first one. I mean, it was Michael Arndt from what's the movie, Little Miss Sunshine, and Toy Story fame.
And didn't he say he couldn't crack it because everything just ended up with Luke in it and Luke overshadowing everything in the film?
That's correct. So he wrote Luke as the fan favorite badass, And every time he brought Luke into the movie, it just completely, the whole script fell apart because he's like, I cannot figure out how to get Luke in here while still making you care about these new characters,
right?
Because he just completely takes over the movie. And so they brought in JJ Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan, who essentially said, let's just kick Luke down the road. And he's the MacGuffin for the entire movie. And so we learn about all these characters. Yeah, we learn about all these characters before we get to Luke. So I thought that was a pretty creative idea. But then, of course, like Ryan was writing the second one before The Force Awakens even released. And so he was just basing it off the script. And so he probably took the ideas in the script and didn't even see the final edit. And then he had to craft this movie, basically not given any direction on where it was going. I mean, there's various interviews where they're like, did they tell you what to do? And he's like, no, I basically had free reign over the whole thing. And so on one hand, that's a blessing because he can kind of write whatever he wants. But on the other hand, I feel like he was almost too nice about how he wrote the movie, because at the end of The Last Jedi, he like ties everything up in this like neat little bow and gives you no branching off points whatsoever.
Right.
Which is good because the next person can do whatever the hell they want, but it's bad because there's no like immediate question that needs to be answered. I think I saw many people after they saw The Last Jedi say something like, I don't really feel like I need to see the next one. Like there's no compelling like right. Like that final scene where they're on the Millennium Falcon feels like the end of the trilogy. Like that feels like the end of the movie.
Yep.
And so like compare it to, let's say, the original trilogy, where at the end of Empire, you've got like two main plot points that you know are going to be in the next one. We got to go save Han Solo. Luke has just found out that Darth Vader is his father, so he's got to confront him. Like those two questions are like, at the end of that movie, you're like, what? Like you've just learned this huge truth about Luke. And so you're like, is that real? Is he lying? I have to go see the next one to find out. And of course you do. Whereas with The Last Jedi, it was like, I don't know what the next writer is going to do, so I'm just going to make it as like generic of an ending as possible, which I don't blame him for at all.
Right. Yeah.
But it's like, if you're not given any story beats to work towards, then he has two choices. One is don't give any story beats at the end. Don't give a cliffhanger.
Right.
And the other is I'm going to give all of these notes that the next writer has to follow.
Sure.
And so that's why I'm saying like, maybe he was too nice. Like maybe he was like, I kind of want to just let the next person work on it.
So I guess part of this makes me wonder, like Last Jedi went into production like 4 weeks after Force Awakens released in theaters, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like it would have been a better choice to let The Force Awakens marinate and get like some actual crowd reactions? Because at this point, you know, they're already in production a couple weeks after that movie comes out, which, you know, a lot of people went and saw it the first couple weeks, obviously, but not everybody did. And all the fan questions that brewed over those 2 years were based off what they saw in The Force Awakens. So a lot of people were like, all of a sudden, who are Rey's parents? Who is Snoke? Who is this? Who is that? At that point, though, Episode 8 already had a fully completed and greenlit script that they apparently didn't change. So I know the Star Wars movies back in the day, you know, you got 77, 80, 83. So there's 3 year gaps in the original trilogy. And then 99, 02, and 05 for the prequels. Here we had 15, 17, 19. And they were rapid fire with anthology movies in between. Which makes me just wonder, what would it have been like if they let another year of breathing happen in between these films and built that anticipation even further, and also maybe made some tweaks to the script? I think with 9 that would have helped tremendously. And I think I remember hearing something where JJ and Terrio had asked Disney if it was okay to push Episode 9 back to May of 20, which in hindsight would have been horrible because it would have fallen right in the pandemic, and
it might have been even better.
Well, yeah, maybe
an extra year to edit everything.
We'd be seeing it like next week, which is really weird. But I feel like that movie would have benefited hugely from just having some extra time to figure out what the hell they wanted to do. Because they, like you said, it was a clean slate. They had carte blanche. Everything had been mostly tied up, and it was like, well, we have to create a whole new adventure story and also tie 9 films together over the course of 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's almost an impossible task.
Yeah.
When you frame it that way, right? Like Trevorrow had been working on the script for multiple years. He couldn't figure it out. Carrie Fisher dies. And so the big, like, it was kind of like each movie was focused around one of the original characters, where the first one's Han Solo, second one is Luke, third one is going to be Leia. And of course, I mean, rest in peace, Carrie Fisher.
You can't plan for that.
I mean, you can't, no. I mean, Trevorrow couldn't get it to work. So then they have to let him go. They bring in JJ and Terrio to basically just throw something together and film it in like 6 months or something like that. And it's just, it doesn't feel like a creative writing process. I mean, I think I saw interviews with them where they said they were adjusting the script as they were filming.
Yeah, and they were editing while they were filming too. The editor had a computer on set and she was cutting stuff as they were shooting new things.
Yeah, and I don't think it's super uncommon to edit as you shoot, but it feels like they were very rushed. And it's a bad thing to be rushed when you have to tie together 9 movies and basically create an adventure from scratch. I mean, as I said earlier, there was no real thread, no real questions to answer, so they had to pose new ones and answer them in the same 2.5 hours while bringing all of these storylines together. And they had to do it in like 6 months.
And I mean, think about the actors too. Like if you look at Daisy Ridley in the early times of Force Awakens, she has said in interviews that the idea was that she was going to be a Kenobi. And then The Last Jedi comes around and now she's Rey Nobody. And then The Rise of Skywalker comes around, and I don't think they knew while they were filming what lineage they were going to go with. Because the scene where Adam Driver tells her that she's a Palpatine, he's wearing his helmet, which is an easy out to do some ADR in his closet in New York to say, hey, you're a Palpatine, sorry about your bad luck. You know, it's a wild thing because the actors don't have an end game to look at, so they can't focus their performances on where things are going to go. And I don't think that it's a good idea to literally have all 3 movies written before you start. Like, I don't want to do like a Lord of the Rings type thing with Star Wars and have it be one big story and split it into 3 movies. Because then you're taking away the creative freedoms of the people making the films. But at the same time, you got to have like the bones of it, right? Like A, B, and C have to be there, and then you can fill in the gaps while on set.
Right. And I mean, we can take any like very successful movie saga and kind of like trace that out, right? Where, you know, the original trilogy, highly doubtful, as much as George Lucas wants to tell you that he had the whole thing planned, like it's highly doubtful that he knew all of those story beats before, as he was making A New Hope, right?
No, God, no.
And so he made A New Hope, and it was very small, and then he expanded it little by little. It almost feels like A New Hope is movie 1, and then Empire and Jedi are kind of like this duo that fit together really well.
Yeah, I can see that. Almost kind of like Back to the Future, where it's like 1 and 2
The
and
Matrix is kind of the same way. Pirates of the Caribbean is the same way. A lot of the times you're making this first movie and you put all of your good ideas into this first movie, and then it's a hit, and you're like, okay, well now they want to do a trilogy. I gotta build these ideas in the second act, and then I gotta finish them in the third act. And I think that's where it really helps to have like the same creative vision, right? Where, you know, George Lucas, although he didn't write 5 or 6 from a screenwriting perspective, he was there the whole time, right? I mean, he wrote the outlines, and I mean, he had other people helping as well, but he was there to be that sort of guiding light where, you know, he can make the executive decisions. And it doesn't feel like the sequel trilogy has that, right?
Which is a shame, because it's not the type of thing where it's like, hey, let's try to make one new Star Wars movie, and if it's successful, we'll do more. They had said, they knew we're doing a trilogy. Like, the first thing that you should do when you sit down saying we're going to do a trilogy is, okay, well, where's it going to start and where's it going to end? And then let's figure everything else out and then go shoot it, you know? Do you think it would have benefited, and maybe not so much with JJ, but just with one director for all 3 movies?
I don't think it had to have the same director.
Okay.
but at least have like a core writing team that kind of blends all of them together. Because if you look at the Marvel movies, right?
Yeah.
Like they all feel fairly consistent in tone, right? They all kind of fit together and they're working towards a main storyline, but you bring in directors from basically everywhere. I mean, everywhere. And they can each bring their own little flair to their individual movies, but they still feel pretty cohesive.
Yeah.
Whereas Star Wars didn't feel that way. It felt like one guy did the first one, a completely different guy did the second one, and then the first guy kind of clashed with the second one in the third one. And so it didn't really work or blend together that well.
Yeah. It's interesting when you say that, because I read an article a while back about the Marvel TV shows, and they're doing a slightly different like structure and hierarchy than normal television production, where they don't have a showrunner. So like there's a head writer, there's a director, but there's no like Vince Gilligan running Breaking Bad where he's the creative voice. All of them say Kevin Feige's the showrunner because he is that vision. He's the George Lucas of the MCU, and that's why it all fits so well together, because the buck stops with him. And I think Lucasfilm is moving towards that. Dave Filoni is now a creative executive director, or whatever title they gave him last summer, where as far as I can tell, any new story stuff kind of has to get past him before it goes up to Kennedy and the Disney folks. So it's good because it kind of feels like they've learned from their mistakes a little bit, but it just kind of makes you wonder what could we have had if this stuff was all in place, you know?
And it really hurts because had they done this with like a completely new off the wall trilogy with no existing characters or anything like that, I think people are a lot more forgiving.
100%.
But the fact that they took the source material that was so beloved by so many people and chose to expand on that and kind of found their footing and face planted along the way, it just leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. Whereas, people are willing to overlook a miss, right? Like, I tend to like Solo in general, but like that was kind of a miss in terms of like box office success for Star Wars. But people like forgive that, right?
Yeah, because it's a fun movie.
It's a fun movie. It works, and it's not like, I say it doesn't really ruin anybody's childhoods or anything like that.
No,
but,
I bet there's
it's
somebody.
a fun little,
Never underestimate the internet, Shane. There's always someone whose life is ruined by Han getting his last name from an Imperial officer.
Yes. When the whole theater just groans. But yeah, I think that was what their bigger problem was they were trying to write characters that people had so much nostalgia and emotion attached to, and they didn't think it through enough to really do those characters justice. And we can talk all day about like the creative choices and direction that they took with each of these characters. I tend to like not dislike what they did with Han and what they did with Luke, but I think putting together a trilogy that was so disjointed does everybody a disservice. It does a disservice to the actors. It does a disservice to Star Wars as a whole because of all these characters, and it does a disservice to the fans.
Yeah, they're very lucky that at the exact same time that this trilogy was wrapping up was when the Mando Baby Yoda craze hit, because if that wasn't there, I feel like the fan base would have just gone completely apeshit.
Yes,
and it would be a very dark time, but now we have this TV universe, and the next Star Wars movie isn't coming out for another 2.5 years. Which I think is probably for the best at this point.
I agree. I think they're doing it right, where they're kind of taking a step back, figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and crafting more of a plan going forward. I mean, we can talk all day about studio interference and everything like that, but
we've done that on this show a few times with the whole Zack Snyder thing and all that.
It really feels, I think, at the crux of it was this studio that bought Star Wars and wanted to get as much money very quickly out of it as possible, and they were willing to let creative decisions kind of go by the wayside as long as we can get these movies out every single year and crank it out.
We can make this $4 billion back very quickly.
And I think now that they've sort of taken a step back, they're going to do a kind of a reset and figure out like, okay, what can we actually do with this property, which is what they should have done in the first place. And this goes back to like the thesis of this video, like how important it is to have a plan.
Having a plan.
When you buy a $4 billion franchise, know what you're going to do with it.
Right. Or else you find yourself, gosh, what is it? 7 years later, 8 years later, and they're having to hit the reset button. So I think the purchase happened in 13. So
I think it was in, I forget if I was in high
12
school
or 13.
College. Yeah.
Wow.
It was a while back.
Thanks for that. It was already in my adult life when that happened. So thanks for being a young person, Shane. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
Cool, man. Well, for the interest of time, I don't want to keep you too long, but this was, in my opinion, an enthralling, an exciting discussion. Thanks to JJ Abrams just putting a bomb on a silver platter for the fandom that's out there that likes to complain about stuff. But I think we had an intelligent conversation about it. And
I agree.
This was fun. We should do this again sometime and have you on to be my movie snob.
That sounds good. We can talk about how much we disagree on certain Star Wars movies.
I would love that. And we could get into Marvel stuff and you can shit all over them and I can try my best to defend them and probably fail because I'm not as good with words as you are. So
I don't hate Marvel movies. I love some of them.
Which ones do you love?
That.
Real fast. Which ones?
I love Spider-Man Homecoming.
Okay.
Love it.
Okay.
Love Spider-Man Homecoming.
Is it because of the John Hughes idea behind it? And just
my overall, like, we can talk about this in a different video, but my overall thought on the Marvel Universe is it's at its best when it focuses on the characters and focuses less on the expanded universe.
Okay.
And so Spider-Man Homecoming is literally the antithesis of the big Avengers movies, right? He wants to become an Avenger, but the movie is telling him like, just be Peter Parker first. And I love that. I love that idea.
It's funny because it mirrors the real world because Tom Holland wants to be the Disney actor, but he's owned by Sony in that regard. Right. Cool, man. Well, since you spent 20-30 minutes with me today, I'm going to give you the floor and have you tell people where they can find you. I know you photography is something you care about, and I don't know if there's anything else you want to promote, but the floor is yours. Go for it.
No, photography is big. I like movies too. If you want both of those, you can follow me on my Instagram at ShaneWarePhoto or my Twitter at ShaneW21.
Cool. Sounds good, man. Well, we'd love to hear from you guys. Drop us a comment down below. Let us know what you think. Are you a planner or do you like to wing it? Are you a JJ Abrams or are you a Ryan Johnson? Let us know in that comment section below. Please like this video if you want to support the channel. If you're new here, go ahead and click that subscribe button and click the bell as well to turn on those notifications so that way you don't miss any future videos from us. And until next time, we will see you guys in the next video.